Hey everyone, Gary Simon here of Coursetro, and I am an idiot because I just recorded this tutorial and I ran out of disk space, and it said, free some up first and then hit resume, but I hit cancel instead. So I had a 25-minute tutorial that I just completely deleted voluntarily by myself. So we're going to redo it. Okay, here I go. I'm going to try to make it better this time. First, if you've been wondering where the hell I've been, I've just finished up my last course requirement. So I'm going to be pumping out videos left and right. Make sure you subscribe here. And so, yeah, we're going to focus on positioning using the CSS grid today. And it is awesome. It is simple and it solves a lot of problems, and there's no hacks. It just works. So before we begin, I want to set up just a very quick little dev environment so that we can have automatic browser reloading when we save files. And it'll make it easier on me when I teach you. So, oh, but real quick, before we begin, make sure you check out my site, Coursetro.com, where you're going to find a bunch of courses on modern design and development. A lot are free, and the others you can access for the cost of buying me like a 6-pack each month. That's it. Now, also, it probably wouldn't hurt to subscribe here on YouTube, and be sure to make sure the notifications are turned on. All right, let's get back to it. First, make sure you have Node.js. You can check it out if you hit Node V in the command line. If that does not show up, make sure you go to nodejs.org, download it, install it, default options, reload your browser, or your command line, and then you'll have it. So let's go ahead and make a directory, CSS align. No, let's call it grid align. Grid align. And after it makes it, let's go jump into it with grid align. All right, so npm init to create a package JSON file. We use the Y flag to answer yes to all those. And then, or just hit enter rather. And then let's go ahead and install gulp and browser sync. And we'll save it as a dev dependency in a package JSON file. And of course, gulp is just a JavaScript task runner. It's very popular. And it's going to run this browser sync task once we tell it to momentarily. So I'm just going to wait for this to install and come back. Oh, and also I use Visual Studio Code. It's a free code editor made in Electron by Microsoft. It's very popular. A lot of people use it. I like it. And momentarily, I'm going to type in code and a period, which will launch the Visual Studio Code app for me in the directory. So that's handy. All right, so let's go ahead and do the obvious stuff. Index.html, we're going to need that, so we're going to write our HTML. You don't have to do this part. Let me just do this real quick. Oops, wrong way. These are settings here that I have disabled, but I want to re-enable them real quickly so that I can type ! Hit enter, and there's our HTML boilerplate real quickly. I'm going to re-edit those. See, these things kind of just make life a little bit harder when I'm recording. All right, so let me get that down. Okay, let's call this CSS grid, and then we're going to, I'm just going to copy and paste this, include a CSS main.css file. By the way, if you check the description here on YouTube or any other network, there's a written version of this tutorial, so you can see all the code that if I happen to copy and paste something. Okay, so let's save this. Let's go ahead and create a CSS folder with a CSS file of main.css, empty for now, and then finally a gulp file.js. Gulp file.js. Okay, so this is probably the last time I'm going to copy and paste something. So from the written version of this tutorial, find this little section and paste that in. We're just importing our gulp and browser sync that we installed here. And then we create a task called sync where we start a browser, and then we also watch for any HTML file or CSS file in the CSS folder. And if they're changed or saved, then we reload the browser. Very, very simple stuff. So let's go back to our command line. We'll type gulp and sync. All right, so off on the side of my screen, we have our blank, empty, let's see, HTML file here. So, oh, by the way, I'm going to split screen this so we can see what's happening in the code editor as we code. All right, cool. So the very first topic we'll discuss is how to center something both horizontally and vertically. And we'll talk about one item. All right, so let's get rid of this. Let's go to index.html. All right, so for the HTML, it's going to be very simple. We're going to say div class equals container. Inside of here, we'll say h1. Sorry. We'll say my content, and then we'll also put a paragraph. We'll say my paragraph content right here. Okay, whatever. Okay, so when it comes to the grid, the CSS grid, you have to have a grid container of some sort. So one of your elements in the HTML has to be the container for the grid rows and columns. When it comes to the body tag, it's the very first tag, that can be a grid container, and that's what we're going to use. So our very first, or one and only grid item is this div class container right here. All right, so let's go ahead and think about that. And real quickly, okay, I lied. This is the last time I'm going to paste something. I'm just going to have some body HTML, margin 0, height 100%, change the font, whatever. Not a big deal. So let's go ahead and define the actual grid container, which is the body tag. Display grid, simple, awesome. Now, how many rows do we have? We have one, right? So let's go ahead and define that grid template rows, and we'll say auto. We have one row. You can specify multiple rows by putting other values in here, but we obviously don't have that now. And so how do we, let's save this. And if I hit Control-Shift-I to view an inspector, we'll see that we do have a grid container. See the little dashed line, the outline? That's a grid, bro. Awesome. Okay, so how do we align this thing to the center? Well, first, before I get to that, I want to more easily allow ourselves to visualize what this container looks like. So let's go ahead and put container, background, light gray. Okay, so this is what the grid container looks like. It's the grid item rather. It takes up the whole thing. So let's go ahead and try this. We're going to put in justify items and center. Ooh, look at that. All right. So let's put align items as well and make that center. Would you look at that? This looks just too messed up for me. So let me real quickly put in border radius 10 pixels and then padding 1 em, not erm. All right, there we go. So that's how you absolutely position a single row, a single piece of content in the browser. Dead freaking simple. It's awesome. All right, so let's go ahead and focus on another use case. Let's say, for instance, we wanted to center multiple items. So we only have one grid item here. Let's go ahead and copy this, paste it a couple more times. There we go. I don't know why it always shifts those over. All right, so let's also, real quickly, give these IDs. So item 1 is here. And we'll say 2 and 3. Okay, cool. All right, so right now, they're all centered, but they're stacked on top of each other in rows. What if we only want to have one row but 3 columns? All right, so this is where you need to adjust right here, not adjust, but add a columns property. So grid template columns, we're going to say auto, 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 right? Because we have 3 of them. Now, if we save this, oops, wrong one. There we go. Now, a better way and a quicker, easier, less verbose way of saying auto, 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 which is very repetitive. We can say repeat. It's a function. So in the first argument is the number of times we want to repeat this value here, auto. Same thing. All right, awesome. Okay, so right now we've dealt with, or so far, we've only dealt with aligning all grid items in the grid container. So whatever we set justify items and align items to, and by the way, these are aligning on the column and row axis, or in other words, horizontal and vertically. It's been applying whatever value here, it applies to all of them. What if we wanted to align differently each one of these individual items? Well, okay, so that's where first we have to have some way of communicating the names of these rows or these columns as well. The easiest way to do that, there's two different ways. Right now, each one of these auto, they have what are called implicit names. That means it's implied already. We don't have to state it, and they're numbers. So the first auto, or the first column, is 1. The next is 2. The next is 3. And then we can reference those in the actual the IDs of 1, 2, item 1, 2, and 3, with the grid column start and grid row start, grid column end, and row column end. I personally don't like it. I like using the second method, which I'm going to show you here. We're going to use, or define rather, a grid template areas property, and we're going to say the first column is item 1, and then the next will be item 2, item 3. You can call these whatever. They just happen to be the same names as the IDs. That has nothing to do with it in HTML. So now we've named each one of these, okay? And the way we will go about referencing them now is to create item 1, and then the way you tie these up, or you assign this name to, let's say for instance this one right here, well, we create a rule set for the ID that's on this HTML, and we say grid area item 1. All right, so now let's remove this because these properties won't work together. We'll say, instead of justify items, we're going to say, because we want to do 1, justify self. And it accepts the same 4 potential values, as well as these ones up here that we had. They all accept the same potential values, which are start, end, center, and stretch. Right? So we'll say end, and if we save this real quickly, I did something wrong. I think I did. Grid area. Yeah, something's wrong. One moment. This is the ID of item 1. Justify self is end. Let me try align self. Okay. There we go. That makes a little bit more sense. Sorry about that. I need to scale this down, the browser, a little bit because we're working at a lower res. And we could see now that based on, let me put start here. If we change this to start, it's gonna push all the way up to here. Oop, yep, there we go. So justify self is saying push it to the end over here. If we change this to start, we'll see it'll go to the very left. Awesome. So now let's experiment with this a little bit further. Let me back up. It's going to be end and start. We'll copy this and then paste it 2 times, 2 and 3, and then 2 and 3. We match these up respectively. Again, the IDs have nothing to do with these names. And let's try making this one start. So it'll be over here. Now they're touching each other because this is end and this is start. And then let's also change this one to align self end. That'll align it to the very bottom. Sweet. And then finally, this one, let's just try center in both of these. There we go. So that is alignment in a nutshell. Like I said, it's these 4 properties. 2 of them, justify self is for aligning a specific grid item, and justify items is placed in the grid container, and that will align all those items. And then same thing with align self and align items. They all accept, like I said, the same 4 values. So let's go ahead and I really believe in muscle memory. So let's try to get some more experience with this. I'm going to delete everything right here except for the initial CSS, and then also delete all this stuff. Let's say we wanted to create like a 2-row layout where there's a bunch of content up here and then a footer. So how would we absolutely align a footer to the very bottom in this context? And we're going to build on this too. We're going to add a sidebar and stuff, but let's just start with this for now. Div class, we'll call it content. Here is my content, and then we'll say footer. Oh geez, I did the same thing last time. Footer. We'll say this is my footer bar. Okay, cool. Get rid of that. and save. Very simple HTML we're working with here. Okay, so now let's go ahead. Again, our grid container is going to be the body again. So grid, or display rather, display grid. And we're going to, I also want to put margin 0. And then we're going to say grid template rows. Okay, how many rows do we have again? 2. All right, so the first one we want it to take up all of this available space, so we're going to put auto. And then the second row, we don't want it to be very tall. We're just going to say fixed value of 50 pixels. All right, so if I save this, there we go. This is so easy. So Control-Shift-I, let's look at this. There's the top row. Here's the bottom row. Okay. Now, next, I do want to use grid template areas to name them. And again, we don't have to do this. I mean, it's still going to work. Up here, we'll call it content, and this is going to be footer, but we're going to need this momentarily. So let's just save this. Again, nothing's going to change. We simply just named these 2 rows right here. So let's also reference our content, and we tie it up how? Grid area property with the name content. And let's center this thing. So justify self is center, and then align self is center as well. Ta-da, freaking awesome. Now let's go ahead, I'm just going to copy this. We also have our footer. The name is footer, as right here. And then just so we can see the whole thing, let's just put background color, light gray, and give it some padding of 10 pixels. There we go. Stays there, stays put. Awesome. Okay, so let's try adding a sidebar to this thing, like over here. How would we do that? Well, we first need the markup. So we'll use an aside element. We'll use an unordered list for a menu. These are going nowhere. Home. Shift, Alt, and down arrow key will replicate the line. I only want it 4 times. We'll just name this about services and contact. Okay, so let's save that. Now it's going to mess up because we don't have the proper row and column structure now, because now we have 2 columns. We're going to have a column here for the sidebar, and then the column here, which is going to hold the my content and footer. So let's see if you can figure this out. Grid template columns, we'll say like 20% of the left of the browser, and then auto. All right, this stays the same, but this has to change though. So we'll change this to sidebar, because what do we want in terms of the column structure? It's a sidebar right there, and then our content. We also have to adjust this. We can just say, we can repeat footer if we want the footer to go all the way across. So we'll save it. All right, so it's a little hard to visualize because we don't have a background here. So let's reference that aside. No, just 20. And then we'll say grid area, sidebar, because that's the name we gave it, and then background color, gray. Look at that. Now, how would we, for instance, what if we wanted the sidebar to come all the way down here? We don't want it to just end on the top. Well, you literally have to change just like one line. It's so simple. Sidebar, sidebar, bam. So easy. So as you can see, when it comes to alignment, it is super simple with the CSS grid. It pretty much, that's the way it should have been for the last 20 freaking years, right? So yeah, hopefully you learned a lot. It even becomes a lot funner when you work with media queries. Let me just do a quick example. Let's get a media query going down here. And we'll say media screen and max width 39.9 blah blah blah. This is basically saying smartphone size. So anything inside of here will be applied to a viewport that's consistent with like a smartphone. And let's say, for instance, for some wacky reason, we wanted to change the order or structure of, we wanted to flip these. We wanted the footer up here and the content down here. How do you do that? It's dead simple. Let's copy the body rule set. We're going to get rid of all this stuff because we don't need that to be redefined. And it's literally as simple as this. Footer can go here, and then content can go here. Save it. Look at that. We can watch the transition between these, as we go from around 40 EMs to that. So as you can see, super flexible, super awesome. Hopefully you learned a lot. So yeah, make sure if you like this to check out coursetro.com and also subscribe here. I'll be seeing you a lot more frequently. All right, goodbye.